Welcome everyone to today's CSI seminar. Welcome in the room and over at Zoom. So today, me and Daniel will take on assertive communication and boundary setting. So we are going to look at how to communicate when things do not go as planned. So many situations when boundaries and healthy communication is needed has to do when we have this misalignment between people's needs, priorities, and expectations. For example, at the end of the week, we might have some needs to go home and have our weekend alone and relax, but someone else might need us to finish something soon and might need our help. That's when boundaries come in. So what are those? Well, we can define it as a demarcation or a dividing line that separates one entity, area, or concept from another. And when it comes to personal boundaries, these are lines that we draw for ourselves. So in terms of our level of comfort, what we are willing to accept or tolerate from others. So maybe we ask to get some constructive feedback and we get this reply. So what do we do when we set a boundary? Many times it's like that we say that, okay, this was not okay. But if the person doesn't then heed that, we might excuse ourselves from the situation. And there are many types of boundaries. To name a few examples of personal boundaries, this can be a physical boundary, like how close do we stand to someone, and I'm not going to hug you. Is a hug okay? Emotional boundaries, there could be limits on emotional intimacy and sharing, or time spent with a difficult person. Like I will limit my time to 15 minutes with this person, for example. Material, so sharing of belongings or gift giving and receiving. There can be time boundaries, like no work email during certain times, or a scheduled me time. This is my time. And financial boundaries, like setting and keeping a budget, or around loaning money to friends. Relationship, like no spying on your partner, or keeping a civil tone at work. There can be sexual boundaries around consent or flirting, for example, in a work setting. So when do we set a boundary? Well, we know that we need boundaries when we start feeling resentment, or if we feel overwhelmed, or if we feel burnt out, or if we avoid some people and situations. So why do we not set boundaries? Well, it's uncomfortable to set a boundary. And also, we might feel guilty when we set a boundary around something, or we don't want to say no, or we fear that someone will get angry. And these are very common situations and feelings around boundaries, and it's not something wrong. This is something that we probably all have experienced to some extent or another. Instead, look at them as like signals, like, okay, so when I start experiencing this in my everyday life, then it's time to reflect and start thinking about, maybe I need to set a boundary somewhere here. So it's more like a signal. It's not like, oh, things are really like bad or wrong or anything. But it's important to reflect around this to protect ourselves. Yes.
Yeah. So now Linda explained a little bit what boundaries are and when we need boundaries. But the question is, how do we actually set the boundaries? And to give you some help with that, we will talk a little bit about some specific communication type we call assertive communication. But before we move on to that, we will explain some basic communication types that we all probably have experienced or experience in our everyday lives. For example, we can communicate in a passive way. And if we do, we kind of allow our rights or needs to be violated by others. We kind of communicate in an apologetic way. And in general, we behave in a way that makes us easy to be disregarded. When we communicate aggressively, then we kind of do the opposite. We are insensitive to the other people's needs, and we kind of trump them over. We dominate them, and we force them to give up their needs or rights. And we can also communicate in a passive-aggressive way, which I'm sure everybody is familiar with. It's it's actually somewhat of an indirect resistance. So we're still not cooperating, we're ignoring the other person or sabotaging. And it's very important with passive aggressive that we also kind of make the other person feel that we are communicating in a passive aggressive way, but we don't say it out loud directly. Okay? So when we are passive, we kind of put ourselves below the other person. And in the other two cases, we put ourselves above the other person's needs. Okay? And we can kind of use this honest, appropriate, respectful, direct scale. Well, in this particular case, honest and direct are kind of similar, and appropriate and respectful are kind of similar. So when we are passive, we are respectful, but we are not direct. We don't say what we mean. Okay, we kind of hide our needs from the other person. When we are aggressive, we do the opposite. We are not respectful, but we are actually quite honest. We say what we mean. We say that we are angry, we want something, we say that out loud. And when we are passive aggressive, it's kind of neither, because we don't say it out loud, but we are also not in a respectful way communicating. Okay, so we will actually kind of show you some examples of how you might imagine a scenario like this through some experiences that maybe we have actually experienced this week, to be honest. When maybe you imagine a scenario when we're late afternoon in the lab, and then you kind of
Excuse me, this needs to be finished by Monday.
well, no problem. I will get it done. And
So when we communicate with others, there is always like two dimensions, which we will show now. It's the thing that we speak out loud, and then the things that goes unspoken. So here, the person I am playing has a lot of deadlines, and they have a need to get things done quickly, while
well, when I'm saying that no problem, I will get it done, I'm actually thinking about all the social plans I have to cancel so that I can finish what the professor is asking. And well, as you can see in this passive communication, I'm actually not saying what I mean. I kind of hide my internal monologue from the professor, and because the professor has no way of knowing of my real needs, there is actually no boundary. My communication is respectful, but there is no boundary. So let's see how this would play out with an aggressive communication.
excuse me, this needs to be done by Monday.
Well, is this even legal? I'm going to talk to my union about this. Well, I might actually think, well, you're not my weekend boss. You have no way around to boss me around on the weekend. And as you can see, what I say what I mean. And well, technically, this is also a boundary because I'm not allowing my weekend time to be violated, but it's communicated in an aggressive way, which in later will result in a conflict, which is not desirable at all. So let's say the passive aggressive.
Yeah, this needs to be done by Monday.
Well, sure. Well, I might think, well, it's stupid to think that I will work on the weekend. And as you can see, there is a clear discrepancy between what I'm saying and what I'm thinking. And there is still a boundary because I will still not have my weekend time bothered, but it's not communicated well. And the issue with this is that the professor, although might feel that there is something wrong, will not directly know this. And eventually, there's going to be a different, like I will not do the job and they will realize that I didn't do the job. So there will be a difference between expectations and experience. And this will result in a conflict later on. So again, we want to avoid this. And well, one way to do this is to introduce assertive communication, which is a communication method where we can kind of consciously build a communication style in a situation like this, where we put ourselves on the same level as the other person. Now, I think assertive in the English language has this connotation with being a bit arrogant, but in this particular case, this means a little bit different. So what you're kind of trying to do is you're trying to put your needs and yourself around the same level as the other person, and then you're trying to negotiate. And for example, what you do is that you need to understand your needs and feelings. And you also need to pay attention to the other person's needs and feelings to try to understand that. And you have the right to express yourself, and you should express yourself, but you also have to leave room for the other person to do the same. You need to be calm, but you need to stay firm and stand your ground. You need to communicate the boundaries, so you don't want to be passive, but you also should be open to negotiate. And you can ask for favors, and this is actually very powerful in many situations. Just ask for what you need in a way that is respectful, but you also allow the other person to refuse a favor if it's too bad for them, because, well, that's their need as well. And well, in a conflict, you will receive insults. You have to be able to handle them. So if somebody insults you, you have to like sort of build a shield around you so that you don't get angry and defensive, because that will escalate the situation. But you also want to avoid labeling the other person. I'm sure you've been in a situation. I sure have been in a situation where I got in a conflict with someone, and either me or the other person got hung up on one word. What do you mean I'm lazy? What do you mean I'm this? And then it's very difficult to come back from that. So try to avoid these hurtful words. Try to avoid labeling, because it puts the other person in a corner. They become defensive, and that is going to be difficult to negotiate. And you need to separate opinions from facts. So something happened, and I feel that it was wrong. And that's two different things. One of them is an opinion, one of them is a fact. And if the other person does mix these, you have the right to ask for clarification to make sure that we are on the same page. Okay, so you try to balance between the other person and your needs as well. And here the goal is not to get your way. Here the goal is to negotiate, to de-escalate, to reach a compromise. And overall, there is no guarantee that the other person will behave well, but you need to expect that. It's just a tool for you to increase your chances of cooperation. And if you keep practicing this in your everyday life, you might feel that your mental health improves because you understand your needs. That's something that actually very few of us do. And you can communicate it in a way that resolves conflicts instead of creating them. So let's revisit our example with an assertive style.
Yeah, sure. Well, this needs to be done by Monday.
Well, I'm unable to work during the weekend, but I can finish it by Tuesday. Well, I might think, well, I still need my weekend to recharge, and I still have social plans as well. So again, I say what I mean, but I'm open for negotiation. I'm communicating in a respectful way, and I build a boundary. Well, as I said, the other person might not react assertively, and we still need to remain assertive when the other person doesn't. So let's see how this conversation might continue. So
you won't make it till Monday. Well, it's okay, I guess. Take your time. Problems ahead.
Well, thanks. It was easier than I thought. Well, of course, in this case, since the professor is not saying what she means, there is no way for me to know that there is actually a lot of stress behind this. And it's very difficult to handle it. In my language, there is a saying that even the mother doesn't understand the needs of a mute child. So if you're not speaking up for yourself, nobody will know what you mean or what your needs are. So it's very difficult to come back from this. But if it's an aggressive response,
so you won't make it until Monday. Well, with that attitude, you will not make it very far at all.
well, I hear your urgency. For Monday, I can maybe finish some parts which have the top priority. Well, I might think that, well, maybe this is urgent for them. I will stand my ground and not work on the weekend, but I may be able to get some things done. Of course, this is very idealistic, and you probably won't be able to do this in real life, but sometimes I managed. not this week. But of course, the professor was not reacting like this, but it is still difficult. But what we mean here is that you can, if somebody is responding in an angry way, you can actually try to see behind this anger, because there is probably some frustration or some sort of stress behind. And you might want to kind of see around this and say, well, maybe they are actually very stressed, and maybe that's why they behave like this. And we can still somehow negotiate some sort of boundary, but you kind of want to see behind this anger. So let's say.
Well, so you won't make it until Monday. That's unfortunate, and it could have, unwanted consequences in the future. So guess who's not getting the travel grant in this group this year?
Well, I hear your urgency, but could you please elaborate what you mean by that? So, what does this really mean? Am I in trouble now? So as you can see, well, in this case, as in commonly with passive aggressive words, you kind of sense that there is something off. And in this case, you kind of have the right to ask for a clarification. So what does the other person really mean? You can ask back, and maybe they will actually say this to you, that, well, because you have to, like, don't let them hide their intentions fully. You have the right to respectfully ask, please, can you clarify what you mean? And that can actually be powerful in many situations. So as we mentioned, sometimes you have to build an emotional shield around yourself when you get into a difficult situation. And well, some psychologists put together this Bill of Assertive Rights. And actually, if you search this online, you will find 1,000 different versions. This is one that I've found, and I actually written it down and kind of put it in a frame and put it on my wall. To always remember in difficult situations, when you end up in a situation like this, to take a step back and remember that I have the right, for example, to my dignity. I have the right to feel good about myself. And if someone insults me, I have to remember that, well, I'm actually not a horrible person. It's just that the conflict is such that they say this, and I have the right to defend myself against this. I have the right to say no, which is actually very difficult for me personally to set a boundary like this, but sometimes I have to remind myself that I have the right to say no. I have the right to change my mind, ability to make mistakes, and what is also very important, I have the right to ask for what I need directly. And that's actually can be very powerful to say this out loud, even if it feels very obvious. You can say, well, I need time off. I need time to recharge. Please give me that time because I need it. You can ask for favors. Maybe the other person refuses, but you can ask for your needs directly. And well, this technique can also be used to prepare yourself for potentially difficult conversations when you have, like, for example, with your friends, partner, family, or with your boss, even by going through, by kind of build up a monologue that you say to the other person before starting a conversation. First, you have to stay objective, state the facts, describe the situation, what happened, for example. You have to explain how that made you feel, and it's very difficult. Many people don't find it difficult to describe how they feel about a certain thing, but the idea here is to separate facts from feelings, okay, and opinions. You can and have to explain how, for example, a certain situation affected your relationship with the other person, and you can say this directly, and it actually helps if you say this directly. And then you can make a request. Request is something, again, asking for a favor, but leaving room for the other person to refuse as well. Of course, not in very hard boundaries. You don't want to refuse there, but you also need to leave some room for negotiation sometimes. So for example, in this case, you might say, well, the deadline was very short notice. I had to work over the weekend. This is a fact. You can say, well, this made me feel very overwhelmed, tired, frustrated, or even you can say angry. And you can say, well, I could not recharge my batteries and I kind of feel a bit of resentment now. And you can ask, please, next time, please let me know in time so I can plan ahead. Now that I think about it, maybe in the context of talking to a professor, this may be a little too harsh. You need to sugarcoat this a bit more. Maybe don't say angry. But for example, with your family or partner, you can actually say out loud feelings like this. I felt angry. And that can actually sometimes be powerful and even helpful in certain situations. So this is kind of what we had in mind to bring some awareness of some communication techniques.
Thank you. And then we have some questions for discussion. So thank you, everyone.